Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. Thank you for joining us. Today, we are looking at the AuditAdvanced Mercia Company Audit Template version 22.0.01. This is an intermediate level webinar. I'm just going to jump to our first slide, which is just confirming, if you didn't know already, my name is Tom Jeffrey. I'm one of the Education and Media Technicians at CaseWare UK. And today's presentation is going to be delivered to you by Jonathan Miller, our Product Manager for Audit. We've also got our application architect for audit, Adam Finn, in the background, who will be just monitoring your questions with me as our other subject matter expert. So any of your questions, if you pop those into the Q&A field, I'll just point out where that is. So at your toolbar at the bottom, you've got Q&A there. It's very similar between desktop and mobile, depending on what platform you're joining us from. So you've got the Q&A there, and Adam and I will see your question. We'll get back to you as soon as we can. If we don't answer your question during the session, don't worry. We will add it to a Q&A document, and that will accompany the recording of the session. The recording will go onto the knowledge base. It will also go onto our YouTube channel, Client Services, which we'll point out to you later on after the main presentation. Keep an eye out on the chat field as well. If we have any messages that we want to send out to you or any relevant material, then that will go into there. And also you've got your raise hand option. So if you wanted to ask your question live via your microphone, raise your hand and we'll send you an unmute request and you can use your microphone to ask your question live. So that brings me to the end of the housekeeping. So what I'm going to do now is pass you over to Jonathan. Hi, Jonathan, and we'll get started.
Good morning. Right. Oh, good afternoon, actually, isn't it? So good afternoon, everyone. Yes, thanks for joining us for this review of our most recent release, the AuditAdvanced Mercia version 22.0.01 update. It was good to see a number of you at the conference a couple of weeks ago. Nice to see people in the flesh, as it were, but it's good that you can join us now this afternoon as well. And what we're going to look at is some of the stuff that's actually covered in that conference, but perhaps in a little bit more detail and obviously more focused on what we've been doing with the Mercia templates. So here's a brief agenda for what we're going to be looking at this afternoon. So where are we now? Firstly, with the hybrid, after these releases have gone out, what's the situation on the desktop hybrid software solution? Then looking ahead, then looking actually, well, what is new? What do we actually put into this release that's been updated for Mercia's content? And then also looking at the developments we've been making on the cloud. Most recently, obviously this is for the hybrid product, but also interested in explaining to you where we are on our cloud developments. And then we're going to be looking ahead at what is on the horizon. There's another update coming through this year, toward the end of the year, and then particularly looking forward next year to the updates on the software, Audit 24 and Cloud 22.0.1, and how that impacts then on the ISO 315, ISO 240 timeline that we've got lined up for next year, because I know that that's obviously of great interest to many of you. So where are we right now? Again, this is a slide that we put up at the conference just to show you there that the Mercia Academy template went out in August. That includes all the latest AAD and handbook changes. It also included the data analytics and irregularities reporting documentation that we've now put into the rest of the templates. And so those were published for company, LLP, charity and pensions a couple of weeks ago now, on the 7th. So hopefully you've started either installing or getting aware that these updates are there and you can start installing. And this webinar is to explain what we have put into there. And then Also, there was an update to the assurance template. That was largely just references in relation to UK or EU law as a result of the consequences of Brexit, and that came out at the same time. So that's all up to date at the moment for where Mercia have actually released documentation. As I said, we'll have a bit of a look in a few moments toward the end of this webinar as to the future effect. Future what's coming out. So what is new in this update? Well, the first element that we're going to look at is the irregularities reporting. This was created, the new A29 document reporting on irregularities, including fraud in the auditor's report, was created to reflect the ICAEW release in April this year of an audit guide on how to report on irregularities, including fraud. And so what we have now is the audit report has a mandatory section which explains the extent to which the audit was considered capable of detecting irregularities, including fraud. That's something that because that's now mandatory, it was felt by Mercia that actually needs its own separate consideration in the software and so in their methodology. So that's what's gone in. The ADA, the Audit Data Analytics document, this has been released by Mercia, and those who were perhaps at a conference again heard this from Jenny. This has been released in response to the increased use of audit data analytics by accounting firms that we've seen over these past few years. This is particularly where this focus on risk-based auditing is trying to guide the auditor into really focusing down on where the potential risk areas, the major risk areas on an audit occur by using these audit data analytics to interrogate the customers' records. We demoed also at the client conference, and we've got videos of those. They're on our website already now from the webinar, from the conference. We've got them listed in our webinar section. We demoed how this new documentation actually fit in with our current our IDEA software, which we were explaining how that has now come under the umbrella of CaseWare UK for our distribution, and so how you can actually use that already, and how it matches and fits well with what Mercia have produced. So we've got a few documents there that we will go through, the B20, A45 and the N2 ADA. So what I'm going to do now is go into the software, go into the template itself, and show you what we have put in with this release. So firstly, I'll talk about the irregularities reporting. It's a far quicker one to have a look at. Excuse me if I look away at my larger screen. Don't look directly into my camera the entire time. But what we have now within the A21.1, so this is an RI specific requirement, of course, because they are also going to be the ones signing the report. We have a question here right to the bottom that they have actually confirmed that they have approved the reporting on irregularities, including fraud wording, that is now required in the audit report. This just happens to say grouped because I happen to be in a group file. And if we jump then to the A29, this is the new document. We can see there's elements here which we are meant to fill out and complete because of this new requirement. And so what you do is you have to go through and first of all assess that material, the material misstatement risk for irregularities and with in respect of fraud. So first of all, we've got what you record the approach that you have taken to identify non-compliance with laws and regulations and fraud. That non-compliance comes down to an acronym, NOCLAR. So that's this NOCLAR risk. You talk about the approach and that you have taken assessing those risks. Obviously, there's going to be information that feeds in really that you will have in your permanent section on the laws and regulations which are significant to the entity, and any particular considerations that you've given to fraud. And this emphasis keeps coming through in respect of that. Any procedures then that you have specifically thought about to implement and to test as you've been going through your audit to identify those risks? Why have you've got to think about now, how is the audit actually going to be aware that it's going to pick up any risk of material misstatement? Who did you inquire from in respect of that? And then particularly in respect of fraud risk, similar questions, particularly, of course, the management override of controls. That's always a potential problem. It's one of the standard risks that's there in the audit template anyway. And again, how have you audited those? How have you identified them? If you are doing a group audit, then you also have to consider the components as well, and also your component auditors, that communication with them as to how they have also been able to assess this risk. And so there's just these extra little bits that we really have to go into now in a bit more detail in order to satisfy the requirements. The last section there is on the at the bottom here is the wording that you're going to put into your audit report. Now, there is a general discouragement now on the use of boilerplate wording in audit reports. So it's going to be the way that you have identified your audit has been able to pick up these risks, and that you think it will be sufficient to be able to do it. That has to be specific to each audit that you do, because each audit is different. And so, but what we do have from Mercia is some basic starter wording, but then you have to adapt that for your individual circumstances, for the individual client, and for the individual audit that you're going into. Now, if you are going to edit this wording, you will have to click into the top box or press F2, which takes you into that top box. If you just actually click into the box itself, you will actually delete the wording that's there. So just remember that. So F2, and that takes you to the box where you can then start changing the words that are then going to be agreed, which you are then going to put into the audit report. Once you've confirmed that, you would sign that off, and on signing the actual document itself at review by stage, that would lock down the wording that you have agreed, and obviously your signature there. The RI would then come into this section, and they would also then sign off the documentation themselves, and obviously on their sign off, that would then lock everything in that screen. Obviously, if there was but they wanted the wording changed, then the reviewer would have to go back and make that change, or he would just raise it as a review point. So really, that's that documentation. It's just really an awareness that is there now. There's that extra procedure in the RI sign off, and there is this wording there which needs to be agreed. So I think that's all we need to have a look at in respect of the irregularities reporting. What we'll do now then is have a look at this new Audit Data Analytics documentation that we have got. And we'll actually start in the prelim. So the preliminary tailoring checklist has now got an extra procedure in. It's a very quick one, really, an overview right at the start. Just, are you even going to consider using Audit Data Analytics? If not, then it will just remove that new documentation from the software, from your engagement file. But if you do think you are going to be using it, then you will then need to consider the appropriateness in more detail of actually using it. So, for instance, in the planning checklist now, there is a new procedure. There is new procedure 5 here under risk assessment procedures. So where the audit data analytics is going to be considered, then you need to confirm the appropriateness of its use within the audit. There is guidance in the audit procedures manual that's available from our website in the download section that you can get hold of and to have a look at that in a bit more detail. But then what we do is then we have this B20 document, which is where we make this appraisal and assess the actual use of audit data analytics in your engagement. You've got to justify why you're going to be using it. And as we've said, there is actually guidance in here which refers back to the audit procedures manual that you can then look at. So the very first question that you consider is the applicability. The applicability and the potential use of audit data analytics. Why do you want to use it? Justify that as an appropriate reason. You know, there's got to be a reason why you would use these procedures, these techniques now. But of course, it can be used in lots of different areas. So we've got a few there listed out. Where are you actually going to use audit data analytics? Preliminary analytical review, that's going to probably be an area that you would want to consider, particularly if you're looking at this as a risk-based approach audit, which is the way audits are nowadays. You want to focus down on where is the greater risk within my whole audit engagement. So the preliminary analytical review is going to be a fairly regular place we use it. You can also use the data analytics software, if we just go down to the third one, for stratifying your population for sampling as well. Again, this was demonstrated at our conference with IDEA, and how you can actually go through the transactions and actually stratify out, and it will select the sample for you with a look at particularly perhaps toward those higher risk procedures and transactions. The most common place that we're going to be thinking about using it now is perhaps in the use of high risk journals. So this seems to be where the audit industry is at the moment, largely in respect of the use of audit data analytics. Generally focusing on journal entries. We've seen it a lot more now particularly in mid-tier firms that are starting to use software in order to assess risk in the journal side. That's really what has prompted a lot of the work that Mercia have now put into this documentation. So once you've identified where you're going to use it, you actually need to appraise the audit data analytics application that you're actually using. So who is doing it? You may have your own internal in-house version of audit data analytics, which you've been using for years, as Excel spreadsheet or whatever. So, and that's fine. Obviously, there are applications out there, IDEA, Audit Data Analytics AI software. There's different ones that are there on the market, but you do have to appraise the use of it. You've got to justify what you're doing and why. So there's various things you've got to think about there. You've also got to think about really the staff that you're going to use. So there is a little prompt now on B23 that if you are using Audit Data Analytics, think about the staff that are actually going to be involved in the audit. You may have to get someone who's a bit more specialist or has that ability in using the software. Because it's not just a black box exercise, this. You've actually got to be really thinking about how it affects your audit, and you've got to be aware of what is actually being done. Now, a lot of this appraisal work, obviously, you be able to do once if you use if you're using the same software each time, and you will then effectively bring that appraisal into your file each time. But you've got to, as we've said before, got to justify as to why you're actually going to use it on this specific engagement. Is something that's got to enhance the audit rather than just putting it in there for the sake of it, as it were. Obviously, you want to discuss this with your client. You've got to then think about really, well, what data are we getting in? So you actually have to evaluate the data that is being brought in to the analytics application. You've got to assess how the integrity of that data is going to be evidenced. It's got to be complete. So if you've got a trial balance, that's got to match up with your general ledger. So you've got to have that confirmation that you actually do have all the data that you need to actually effectively carry out your audit. And then you'll have to think about preparing that data and how you're going to use it in that application, where it's coming from, what data sets are you going to use? Are you going to use non-general ledger items? Are you going to use stuff from a purchase ledger only, or what are you actually going to use? And then all that information just needs to be recorded on this V20. If you decided right at the start, having thought about it, and you've appraised it, that it's not considered appropriate, then you can switch that off, obviously answer that straight away. But that's the bottom little button there. But obviously, if you are thinking about you are going to use it, then you would click on that button in the conclusion. What I think I'll go now, though, is before we actually look at the detailed audit data analytics and the N2 ADA, I'll just have a look at the appraisal document, which is the A45. So this is a document where it's really the stand back approach. This is a common thing now within all the ISAs and the like, that you actually do stand back and you evaluate. What have we used? Why have we done it? Is it still appropriate? Having actually done it in our audit, was it the right thing to do? In actual fact, this document is for ADA applications and any other technologies that you have used. We've just abbreviated the name of it for the sake of fitting it on the screen, really, more than anything else, so that you actually will consider this and other technologies. And so you just have to do this stand back. You've got to assess, was it appropriate? Again, confirming validity of the data, that you know that you've got the right data in there, and then actually think about what were the results. What did it produce for us? Have we used that then in the audit? Has it directed our audit direction? Has it helped and provided the relevant audit evidence that we need? So those are just considerations you need to fill in, and then again at the end you just fill out the conclusion, whether it's been appropriate to use that data, to use that application, whether the data was indeed complete, and that therefore you have now, having got that information, you've assessed it, you've appropriately recorded it on your file, and evaluated everything that you've done. It's that stand back approach where you assess things with an element of skepticism, but that you're trying to avoid that confirmation bias in the work that you've done. So that's the conclusion. So the actual main working document, as we've mentioned, is this N2 ADA. This is an audit plan that we put together now if you're going to use this in respect of journals. This is the main document that Mercia have now added into the methodology. So very often, if you're most likely to be using an external application, you would generally record details in respect of that on a separate document, which you can then attach into your file. What parameters have you used? justification why you thought it was appropriate. And if that's the case, then you'd just be clicking that top button and also adding your schedule here. There's also this guidance, as we've said. There's a lot of information now. This is perhaps a bit new to many of your audit staff. So there's little bits of guidance all the way through, which you can click on. These are extracts actually from the procedures manual, and it gives you, there's some definitions which may be unfamiliar to people. There's language which is slightly new, so that it can help you understand what you're doing and why you're using it, as explained by Mercia in their audit procedures manual. But you could also, as we've said, you could be doing it manually, and if that was the case, then there's a table here of various criteria that you would want to consider. So these are various risk criteria, again, as we showed at the conference with the idea product. The idea product covers all of these already and then some. So you would want to look at, well, what am I using this ADA to identify? And there's some typical ones. So large value transactions, that's going to be a fairly regular one, I think. You define exactly what size of value your transaction you're looking at. You'd apply a risk score to any particular criteria, and then just define why you've used it. So you've got lots of things like this. So the round sum amount, things like ending with in a 999 or a 000, something like that. 999 might imply that someone's trying to sneak something in under a review threshold, so that they can get away with it. If there's some unusual descriptions, or there's some keywords that you'd want to search on for these journals, again, you can do that. And things that are posted at strange times of the day, Sunday evening or something like that, those ones are going to start flagging up questions, and will require then that investigation as to the testing of that individual journal. And there's lots of things like that: backdated transactions, self-review threats, transactions posted by someone you weren't expecting to do so. So if it was in the purchase ledger, well, why was the person in charge of payroll posting, or something like that? There may be a legitimate reason, but of course it would just flag those items up. And then, having established all those risk criteria, you run your application, you run your tests, whatever. And then you can also add this thing called risk enhancers. So this really is a way of, you've got all these risk criteria that you've thought about already, but you might think, well, actually, this particular area, this particular risk criteria has a greater importance than another. So it could be that you think actually large value transactions over 5 million, that's going to be the most important area where errors could occur, misstatements could occur. Perhaps you're a high worth property company or something like that, and that would flag up immediately as a problem. At that point, then you would add this multiple to the risk enhancer, which then focuses your attention even more closely on the individual transactions that you're looking at, that you want to sample. And these are relevant regardless of whether you're doing it manually or you're using a separate application, external application. And then you actually look at, well, it's done all this, it's churned all the way through and flagged everything up, and this Audit Data Analytics software has given a risk score against all the individual areas at this point. You then want to identify the sample that you want to do for testing. So you could put a criteria there. So any risk that is high, that is there's a transaction with an overall risk score greater than a certain number, then that's one that you'll want to look at. Obviously, these risk scores could build up. So you can have various risk criteria applied to all the transactions. And one of these transactions may just have small elements of risk or medium elements of risk all the way through of those criteria. But when you add them up, it looks like actually, you know, we do really need to investigate this transaction in particular. There may be a threshold, minimum threshold that you look at that you could exclude or look at tests. And then other criteria that you'd want to consider. So that's that basic documentation, and hopefully as you're starting to use this, you get more familiar with it, and it becomes a common set of documentation that you will then be using in your audits, and enhancing and improving the time that you have on your client engagement. So that's really all I want to say about that. I'll just take a break at that point. Are there any questions that we've got in respect of this new documentation?
Hi, Jonathan. It doesn't look like we've got anything come through just yet.
That's fine.
So hopefully that means that everyone's happy with what they've seen.
Okay.
Don't forget.
Of course, if anything's coming into your head now, put it in the chats and put it down there, and we'll pick it up afterwards. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to go back to my presentation here. Just a reminder, also, all that I've just talked about, this webinar will go up onto our knowledge base in due course, but there are actually already quick vids available. You see them on the screen there, on the KB page, that go through this documentation as well, so you can already have a look at those if you so wish. So what I want to do now is just think about where are we with everything else, particularly the cloud. So we've obviously been working hard throughout this year on our cloud software provision. UK company audit and audit exemption has been available for a good year and a bit now. We then added the Republic of Ireland content from Mercia as well, for both company audit and audit exempt. Charities came out toward the start of this year, and then LLP, or actually the previous year, and then LLPs this year. We initially released LLPs as a beta or a test version because it didn't have some of the content that was in the desktop, particularly the audit exemption content. That is now included in LLP. That was released about a month ago. And also it includes group documentation. Now, this is something we've never included within the desktop hybrid side. So the LLP now has the group documentation for Mercia. That's taken from the company audit manual. That's always what Mercia have said in the past. They don't actually include group documentation in their LLP SAM. But now we have been able to put that into our cloud LLP product. We also released Academy, as we mentioned earlier, in August. We released desktop, but we also released Academy, again, about a month ago. Again, this has been released as a test version. We realize that it's right in the middle of Academy season now, so you may or may not wish to be trying that. But if you do want to trial it, we can set you up right now. If you want to appraise it now, say in planning for next year, or in a parallel with some work you're doing now, please get in touch with your account manager, and we will be able to establish you as a test site for that. So that's now available, as we have said. We've also already had in there from Mercia's methodologies. We've got the SRA Solicitors Accounts rules template, and also disclosure checklists for UK and Republic of Ireland. It's worth noting that we mentioned in the past that the company audit Mercia and all the other templates there that you can see actually had these Audit Data Analytics documentation put in them. I think by July, it's a lot easier in order to put them into the cloud side. So that's what that's again one of those positives, I think, hopefully, that I hope you encourage you to move to the cloud, is the ability for us to release those updates to you as soon as we can. We've also the final one that we're actually releasing right now is pensions. This is in its final stages of QA work at the moment. Again, we will release that as a test version in the next few weeks, and then we'll make it available for general purchase on my CaseWare afterwards. So again, if you're interested in testing that, please get in touch with your account managers, and when it's available, we will be able to enable that for you, and we'll be appreciative of any feedback that you can provide us on that template. The one element that is currently missing from the Mercia suite that we currently offer in the desktop and the hybrid side is the assurance content. So Mercia, as you may be well aware, have a separate assurance SAM as opposed to their audit exemption SAM. And within our desktop hybrid solution, we have audit exemption and assurance content in the same template. So we haven't actually done the assurance working papers. So we're actually going to ask a question now. We raised this at the conference. We may have a slightly different group that are here, and obviously the group that here is specific to Mercia. So I want to ask the question about the assurance working papers. So firstly, I want to understand how many of you actually use the assurance working paper element as opposed to audit exemption within our hybrid solution at the moment. So if you can please, if you've got a browser open, if you could perhaps go to menti.com. You go to www.menti.com, and if you put in this code 87055159, you should then be able to vote on this poll that we are asking. There we go. So somebody's already got there, so that's good. And here we go, starting to get the numbers in. Thank you very much. So yeah, so the question is, do you actually use this assurance report working papers in our current Mercia assurance template? Thank you for that. And then secondly, the question I'm going to ask now is regarding the cloud side of it. You know, if the assurance working papers aren't actually in the cloud, is that going to prevent you from actually moving towards using cloud audit? So again, if you could offer your thoughts on that, please. This is just one of the few times we actually get to be able to ask these questions of our direct membership. So it's nice that we can have this direct feedback from you. Obviously, if any have a particular concern in respect of this, I'd be very interested to hear from you as well. So you can email us at audit@caseware.co.uk, and any informational thoughts on anything that we presented today will come straight to us. Okay, I think we've got actually more people answering the second question than the first one. So thank you for that. I'll just give a couple more seconds on this. I'm aware that we're getting toward our time. Okay, thank you very much for that. That does help us looking ahead. So where are we and what's going on? So this is the upcoming updates that we've got for this year, the end of this year. Mercia have indicated that they are going to release best practice updates, and we're expecting that very soon. We've already talked about the pension schemes in the cloud. We've also got an SRA update from Mercia as well, and that content is going to be progressed over the next few weeks, and so hopefully we'll be getting those releases out to you in good time. So I'd say Jenny at the conference mentioned that they are going to make an update for best practice. Largely this is going to affect their audit procedures manual more than anything else, but it does have an impact at various points in wordings that are used or procedures that are available within the audit manuals as well. As soon as the audit procedures manual is available, we will get that to you in our download section. So that will be available from there. And then what we will do is we'll gradually release this through our cloud audit products as we get the manual, final manual documentation from Mercia. And then it looks like now that we'll probably be releasing all of our hybrid AuditAdvanced audit templates. So that's the main audit templates, version 22.0.02s with this content in. That is now going to likely to be in January. We know that it's not always the best time of year, but you know, we heard of this update about 4 or 5 weeks ago, I think it is now, or maybe 6 weeks, and we are obviously going to progress that through. We know that we've talked about this a little bit recently, how you like a more of a cadence to our releases, so it's every 3 to 4 months rather than sort of dripping out a company audit and then a charity audit because of your installation concerns. So we are looking then to release those around January time, and now looking forward into 2022. We have the ISA 315 stuff. This is the important thing for next year. We have already seen a draft ISA documentation from Mercia. They have provided that to us. So that is obviously will get finalized, but we've certainly got the draft versions of these. So we're looking through their thinking and what is changing in the audit software in their manual. We are also getting a next version of audit system. So audit system 24. This is a release which then enables us to apply the ISA 315 requirements in the actual software itself. We're actually getting a beta version of that on Monday. That's about 3 months earlier than we perhaps normally would have done. And they are hoping for a final release in February. And again, that's been brought forward because they are aware of the importance of ISA 315 for all audits throughout the world. So we can see that we're actually a lot further ahead than perhaps we were with the ISA 570 stuff at the end of last year. And so we will be putting that through our cloud products, our AuditAdvanced products over the year. We will release a sort of just an update version Audit 24, so that you've got Audit 24, so you can start rolling forward into Audit 24 around April time for this next year. So that will just contain the same content that's coming out in January. And then we will then be processing the ISA 315 content. We'll probably make that as a soft release, first of all, on company audit in the summer, so that if you have any short accounting periods or you want to just try it to see how it's working, separate from the full-blown release, and you've got to install it everywhere, and that's all we're supporting, that is what we will likely do. So then it will be available for general release in the autumn when you are coming up to your final end of year audits, because obviously it's applicable from periods commencing after the 15th of December this year. So your 31st December 2022 audits for all intents and purposes. So that's it. Again, any queries really on that? I've got the question and answer session open now. I think hopefully I've brought you up to date on everything we need to do.
Thanks, Jonathan. So we're just about out of time, but if you have any questions, as Jonathan said, please feel free to continue putting those into the Q&A panel, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. And any questions that are submitted will also go into Q&A document. You've also got an opportunity after the session to submit any comments or questions on anything you've seen in the survey. We'd very much appreciate you completing the survey. You'll be prompted to do that afterwards. Also in the follow-up email if you don't have time to do that straight away.
Yeah, I was going to say that if you got a follow-up email that you want to ask, then we can answer those questions, and then we'll put it into the final report that goes out.
So what we'll do is we'll, as I say, any more questions we can get back to you after the session. Just very quickly, because I appreciate we've just run over slightly. Just a prompt, if you weren't aware, we've got the events page on the website, caseware.co.uk/events, and that will give you all of the upcoming sessions and agendas. We are planning quite far in advance now, so you will shortly be seeing some as far ahead as March going on the events page there. So keep an eye on there and you can sign up to attend. And then any recordings will go on our YouTube channel. That's Client Services CaseWare UK Limited. That's along with all of our quick vid playlists as well. And we'll also notify you of upcoming sessions via our LinkedIn page, Client Services CaseWare UK Limited there. So if you'd like to follow us there, then you can be kept up to date with our schedule and any other news within the business. And then finally, kb.caseware.co.uk, and that is for all of your articles and again recordings of webinars along with any Q&A documents. So that brings us to the end of today's session. Thank you very much for joining us. We hope you found it useful and enjoyed it, and we'll see you soon. Take care.
Goodbye. Thank you.